The wealthiest people in America buy things without ever having to spend their own money. But borrowing isn't bad. You don't need to be rich. In fact, you can use this strategy if you understand the structure behind it. I call this the legacy loop. You can start doing this today. Here's how it works. The first step is to buy. Before we talk about what to buy, you need to understand three key terms. Number one, asset. Number two, liability. And number three, collateral. An asset is something you own that is worth real money, meaning it has market value and someone will buy it from you for that market value. And over time, it becomes worth even more money, increasing its market value like real estate or stock and companies. So it works for you even when you're not thinking about it. A liability is the opposite of an asset. It is something that costs you money every month, meaning it has a market value that keeps going down, like a car, which you make a car payment every month, or a big screen TV that you're trying to pay off on your credit card every month. The car payment is not the liability. The car is, it takes money out of your pocket instead of putting money in. And the market value of whatever you bought keeps going down. And collateral is something that has market value that you pledge to the bank when you want to borrow money. Think of it as their security deposit. This may be real estate or a stock portfolio or your art collection. Remember, the bank is not in the business of collecting on your security. They just want to incentivize you to pay your loan back, assuming you want your collateral back. You're basically telling the bank, hey, I own this, and if I can't pay you back, you can have it. Good collateral puts you in a position to receive good loan terms. And good credit history is important, as well as you are showing a track record of being a responsible borrower. This is one of the most important reasons why you should start borrowing early in your career, as it allows you to build your track record of being a high-quality borrower. So let's say you want a loan for $1 million. Well, the bank is going to want to get some form of assurance that you can still pay the loan back. That typically looks like a stock portfolio or real estate or other assets of greater value than the loan. Banks will recognize index funds like the S&P 500 or individual stocks like Microsoft or Apple or Google, the big well-known companies that have been around for decades, are safer bets for the banks. So you want to reduce your liabilities, buy more assets so that you can borrow against your assets. Real estate and whole life insurance policies are also common to borrow against. So you might be asking, but what about everything else? What you want to avoid for this strategy is all the dodgy stuff, the meme coin, the penny stock, or the risky bet that you made on Polymarket. Not because they can't make money. Sometimes they do, but because a bank will not let you borrow against them, as they often cannot underwrite it. So if you want to do this, you have to own the kind of assets that the banks can easily understand the market value. But now you're probably thinking, how do I actually use them to my advantage? And that's where borrowing comes in. The second step is to borrow from your asset base. This is the part that most people never understand. You do not have to sell your assets to use their value. If you structure it properly, you can turn what you own into tax-free cash while the asset itself keeps growing in the background. So borrowing is when you use your assets like your stock portfolio or your real estate as collateral to secure a loan rather than selling those assets for cash. When you borrow against your assets instead of selling them, you get access to cash completely tax-free, and your original investments stay intact so they can continue to compound and grow over time. Here's the thing. The IRS does not let you borrow against your retirement account as collateral for your loan. So you technically can't borrow against a 401k or an IRA. There are some workarounds, but you need to set up a regular brokerage account called a taxable brokerage account with companies like Schwab, Fidelity, or Vanguard. There are three ways you can borrow money. Number one is the HELOC or home equity line of credit. This is when you borrow against the equity you have built up in your home. This is often called a second mortgage, or lovingly a second, where the bank gives you a line of credit similar to a credit card, and then you can draw from it whenever you need it, using the property as your collateral. The second one is called a securities-backed line of credit. I know that's a mouthful. This is when you pledge the investments in your taxable brokerage account as collateral to get a line of credit from the bank. You can use this cash to fund your lifestyle, buy real estate or pay taxes, and even make other investments. But the Fed's Reg-U rules stop you from using it to buy more stocks. You can't double dip back into the securities. The third one is whole life insurance. This is when you borrow money directly from your insurance company using the accumulated cash value of your permanent life insurance policy as the collateral. This is different because it allows you access to cash. It has flexible repayment terms, and if you never pay it back, the loan is just taken away from the final tax-free amount of your life insurance policy, meaning you could borrow from your life insurance policy and technically never have to pay it back. Now, why would you want to borrow money when you already earn it? Two big reasons. Number one, taxes. And number two, compounding. The IRS clearly states that borrowed money is not income. So if the bank hands you a $5,000 line of credit, you pay zero tax on that cash, zero federal income tax, and zero capital gains tax. Now, compare that to selling your assets. If you sold $5,000 of appreciated stock, the IRS is waiting for their cut. And depending on your situation, that could be tens of thousands of dollars in taxes. The other reason is compounding. So when you're spending the loan proceeds, your portfolio is still growing. So think about what just happened. You needed cash. You got the cash tax-free, and your investment portfolio didn't shrink by a single dollar. This is the strategy that makes the wealthy look like they have infinite money, even though they don't. Now, let me tell you a story about my son, Neil. Neil is now 14. And a while back, he got interested in land investing. He found a course from my friend Mark Podolsky, the land geek, and he went deep on it. But at some point, he looked at the process and realized that it was way too laborious because he was a student. Now, building a portfolio from scratch takes a long time, and he didn't have that kind of time as he was in full-time middle school student. So he went directly to Mark and said, I would be open to buying a portfolio from somebody who has already done all the work. Pretty smart kid for 14 years old. 2 years went by, and then Uncle Mark called with an offer. Now here's where this process gets interesting. Neil didn't have all the money. So here's what he did. He borrowed against his own life insurance policy. His sister borrowed from her policy. Even I borrowed from mine. And just to be clear, I didn't give him everything he needed, mainly to see what he would do, and he still needed more investment partners. So he reached out to my partners, Alex and Laia Hermosi, and invited them to invest alongside him. And he pulled all of this money together to actually invest in this land deal. At 14 years old, Neil put together a multi-party land deal, because this is the part that most people don't know. Instead of putting money into a Roth IRA, what I did for my kids was create a series of very intentionally designed whole life insurance policies as a store of value, as a cash flow system. And you may say, Sharon, why would you do that? Well, a few reasons. One, it's asset protected, means nobody can touch it. And two, they can actually borrow from it. My son and my daughter can borrow from these policies whenever they need to and use the money for whatever they want. And here is the best part. When they borrow from the policy, the value of the money inside their policy continues to grow. So even though they're borrowing from it, the compounding never stops. You get an insane leveraged effect on this entire process. Now, everything I just told you sounds fantastic in theory, but there are risks. Here's what could go wrong with your HELOC. Your home is the collateral. That's the deal you made with the bank, and as long as everything goes well, that deal works fine. But HELOCs have variable interest rates, which means if the rates rise, your monthly payment rises with them. So picture this. You borrowed against your home equity to fund an investment. The investment is taking longer than expected to pay off. Well, the rates went up, your payment jumped as well, and now you're carrying a debt that costs more than you originally planned against a home that you live in. If you miss those payments, you're at the risk of losing your home because they have the legal right to foreclose on your home. Now let me tell you about the next risk. Your securities backed line of credit is secured by your portfolio, which is the bank's way of saying, hey, we'll lend to you because your stock portfolio is worth X.
there. But what if the market takes a major hit and the value of your portfolio drops dramatically? Now, your collateral is worth less, and the bank does something called a margin call.
They call you up and say, we need you to deposit cash right now, or we start selling your stocks to cover the loan. Let me tell you about the third risk, and it's the one thing that can make borrowing from a life insurance policy work against you. If you borrow against your cash value and you never pay the loan back, or the interest keeps compounding on top of what you already owe, eventually the loan balance can go larger than the cash value itself. And when that happens, the policy lapses. That means you lose the insurance coverage. And here's the part that really stinks. All the money you borrowed that was never repaid gets treated as a distribution, meaning you owe taxes on it. Again, there are safeguards for this in place, because by the time your cash value is ready for you to borrow, your portfolio is continuing to grow and producing dividends, which often can be engineered to pay off your premiums. This is why the borrow from your policy strategy only works if you're actually managing it. You don't have to pay back every dollar on a rigid schedule, but you do have to keep an eye on the loan balance relative to the cash value. If that buffer starts to get smaller, you either make payments or you reduce what you're borrowing against. Now that you understand leverage and the risk of borrowing, the last thing you need to understand is how to transfer your wealth. Transfer of assets is one of the most important parts of wealth creation, because if it's not done right, it can interrupt the eighth wonder of the world, which is compounding. If you keep your investments long enough, your family may owe way less taxes than you think. This is how some families pass down wealth without paying taxes. Let's say you buy a stock for $35,000 and over the years it grows to $100,000. When you buy an asset, the price you paid is called your cost basis. And if you sold it while you were alive, you would owe tax on that $65,000 profit. But if you don't sell it and you kept it until you pass away, the tax code does something crazy. It steps up your cost basis to the current market value on the day of your death. So that stock that you bought for $35,000 is now worth $100,000, right? Well, if you pass this on to your children, the IRS acts as if they bought it that day for $100,000. The $65,000 of growth that built up during your lifetime from a tax standpoint is gone. It wasn't taxed during your lifetime, and now with the step up in basis, it never will be. So your children or your heirs can inherit that stock at the new cost basis. And even if they sold at $100,000, they would owe zero in capital gains tax because the cost basis matches the sale price. This is why the type of account where you keep your assets is so important. Your taxable brokerage account is the account that lets you borrow the money, but it's also the account that makes the cost basis reset a reality. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, what about my loan? I spent my life borrowing against these assets. So doesn't that mean somebody has to pay it back? Well, the short answer is yes, and here's how it works. Let's say your kids inherit the portfolio tax-free, and with the new cost basis, they then sell a small slice of it and pay off the loan. And because their basis was reset to the current market value, that triggers no capital gains tax. Let me break this down in numbers. Say your portfolio is worth $3 million at your death, and you had a $1 million securities-based line of credit balance that was outstanding. Your children inherit the $3 million. They sell roughly $1 million worth of stock to clear the bank loan, and the remaining $2 million transfers to them. Now stop and look at what just happened. You lived off that loan for years. The loan funded your lifestyle. It funded your deals. It funded your investments, and all of this happened without you ever selling your stock or paying taxes on it. The wealthy stay wealthy because they understand how borrowing actually works, and now you do too. By the way, if you like this video, you should watch the next video on the secrets of building generational wealth. No matter how much money you have,